A teacher earning $75,000 in New York City is deemed to be living below the poverty line. The same salary would land you squarely in the middle class almost anywhere else, but in the Big Apple, you'd be challenged to squeeze into a studio. The fact is, you really need to make $136,656 if you're single to avoid a financial struggle, and $313,368 for a household of 4. And by the time we're finished today, you will know the 5 brutal reasons why New York has turned into a financial horror story for millions, and why it's getting worse every day. Section 1. The staggering reality. Let's begin with some numbers that will stagger you. The average cost of living in New York City for one person is approximately $7,667 per month. And that's ignoring the fact that most people can't afford to live solo. To put that in perspective, that number is 74% higher than the national average and 68% greater than what most Americans are spending. But wait, it gets worse. If you're a family of 4, you need to earn an annual combined income of $318,406 to live comfortably. That means both parents would have to earn 6-figure salaries just to pay for the essentials in the Big Apple. The real astonishment to me was this. New York City is the second most expensive city in the world for cost of living, after only San Jose, Calais. We're discussing a city where an average studio apartment runs $2,480 a month, and that's simply the median rent. Rental vacancy rate falls to a historic low of 1.4%, the lowest since the 1960s. When they do come on the market, for real, we're talking lines down the block with a couple of hundred people vying for just one apartment. Section 2. The dream-killing housing crisis. Now, here's the really creepy part. New York is confronting what experts consider the worst housing shortage in more than half a century. From 2010 to 2023, the city added 4% more housing stock, but produced a whopping 22% more jobs. Consider that ratio: almost 6 new jobs for every new housing unit. Since 1960, the city has been in a declared housing emergency, which occurs when vacancy rates are less than 5%. We have now reached 1.4%. That is to say, when you look at 100 apartments, there's only 1 apartment available for rent. But there's a kicker. It's not all about building more housing. Restrictive zoning laws, Byzantine regulations, and sky-high construction costs make the average price of new housing in New York among the highest in the world. Manhattan alone has a median price of $1.6 million for a home. Even in the cheaper boroughs like Brooklyn and Queens, you're aspiring to median rents that would account for 50% or more of a typical American's entire income. Things are so bleak that when Section 8 housing voucher applications were recently opened up, more than 600,000 people applied in a single week. And here's the cruel irony. Almost 50% of families who get vouchers still can't even find places to live with them, because landlords just won't take them. But the housing crisis is only part of it. And you haven't heard about the salary trap that keeps New Yorkers broke even as they earn 6 figures. Section 3. The money stuck why 6 figures is the new minimum wage. If you want some what the trivia. Fact. The living wage, pay to be able to pay for life, in New York City is $33.31 an hour, aka $69,285 a year, needlessly spent on basic necessities alone. But keep in mind, that's without any savings, debt payments, or really anything much in the way of a comfortable lifestyle. In order to truly live comfortably and stick to the 50-30-20 budget rule, which allocates 50% of your income or less on necessities, 30% or more on discretionary spending, and at least 20% on savings, you need to be bringing in at least $136,656 as a single person. But here's where things get truly warped. Given this, it's common for property management companies to require that prospective tenants earn 40 times the monthly rent. So if you want that $2,480 studio apartment, you'd have to make $99,200 a year. For a 1-bedroom at $2,367, you would need an annual income of $94,680. The average salary in NYC is basically $90,000. You clear about $70,000 to $75,000. New York also has some of the highest tax rates. You pay federal, state, and city income taxes, which can add up to 14.66% for high earners in New York City, plus standard federal taxes. Should we use those pop-up graphics between each other? So even if you're making what sounds like decent money, you are ensnared. The median household income in NYC is $79,713. However, the majority of renters, over half, are spending over 30% of their salary on rent, and nearly 30% of low-income renters use more than half their salary to pay for housing. Section 4. The daily spending nightmare. Rent is just the start of this financial horror movie. Let's dig into what it really costs to live day to day in New York. Food costs are brutal. The average single person spends $400 to $500 a month on groceries, and that doesn't include eating out at all. A simple bottle of milk costs $5.14. A dozen eggs cost $3.80, and potatoes come in at around $4.48 per pound. The prices are 14% higher than the current national average. Dining out? Forget about it. A meal at a mid-range restaurant sets you back $30 to $60 per person, and a basic breakfast in a diner will run you from $15 to $20. Even street food, which was once the bargain option, now goes for $5 to $9 for most items. The basic coffee and pastry will cost you $9 to $18. Utilities tack on an additional $250 a month just for energy, plus internet and other costs. Healthcare costs are 27% above the national average, with a doctor visit running about $145 and dental appointments averaging $172. Here's something few people think about. If you need a car, monthly parking in Midtown Manhattan averages $562 a month. Plus, you'll be taxed at 10.375% on parking and an additional 8% surtax for the luxury of parking your car in Manhattan. Yet there's one reason behind these skyrocketing expenses most people never consider, and it's only going to get worse. Section 5. The demand explosion. Here is the paradox that makes New York so unaffordable. You can blame the city for its own success. For the first time in decades, there are more people moving to New York than out. The city's population is rising, yet housing production has virtually slowed to a halt. Why are people coming here even at these costs? 3 reasons. First, career opportunities. In fields like finance, technology, and media, as well as law, in terms of earning potential, there's a New York calculus under which you might be able to justify the expense. Despite 1.2 million new jobs in the city over the past decade, only half as many housing units have been built, at just 400,000. Second, cultural attractions and lifestyle. With 100-plus museums, 40-plus Broadway houses, and thousands of restaurants representing every cuisine on Earth, New York offers a concentration of cultural experience not available anywhere else. Third, the network effect. The titles and professional relationships you can form in New York might represent opportunities that dwarf the higher cost of living. But the thing is, that's a vicious loop. We get clusters of well-paid professionals moving to the city and increasing demand for housing in that area. They have the money to outbid locals, driving prices even higher. This pushes middle and lower-income residents out, but the cycle repeats when higher earners come in. It doesn't help that the city sits on a narrow little isthmus. Manhattan occupies just 23 square miles, and yet it is the economic engine for millions. It has more than twice the population density of other big cities, with 27,000 people per square mile. Section 6. The future outlook. So what's the solution? Unfortunately, the outlook isn't great. In spite of a variety of government responses, including things like City of Yes zoning reform, housing production remains grossly inadequate. Just as we face a housing crunch, data firm Apartment List on Monday reported that rents have soared by 22% beyond pre-pandemic levels and keep climbing. The The McKinsey & Company analysis estimates that the New York region alone would have to return to construction rates not seen since the 1950s, just to build enough housing to make up for what it's missing today, without even accounting for growth. Even with new construction, experts say it would be decades before enough houses were built to significantly affect affordability, assuming that current zoning restrictions are lifted and that the cost of construction falls. The harsh reality is that there are not enough people to occupy all the cricket-friendly parks and fields, so they die of colon cancer on some graffiti-covered baseball field. New York has become a city for rich people who don't want to live in Manhattan and have no imagination. With price growth outpacing income growth, the American dream of making it in New York is sliding further out of reach for ordinary Americans. If you're as stunned by these statistics as I am, be sure to sign up for more in-depth explorations of the economic truths that define our cities. And tell me in the comments, would you still move to New York if these costs were known up front? Or are you living through this housing crisis yourself? Your tales may appear in our next video.